Alrighty, so let's get started. If you remember from the last video, the order of events or actions is that the jihadist player takes the first two actions and then the US player responds. As such, we will not be looking at the US hand until we play the first two cards of the jihadist, and it sort of keeps things simple and just sort of gets the game going. So the way you play the solo game is sort of you create a stack of cards for the jihadist player, and they just sort of play from the top of the stack towards from top to bottom, and that is basically the cards they will play that round. Anytime you add or remove cards, you only manipulate the top card of the stack, so that keeps things relatively simple. As such, I'm just going to flip over cards from the left to the right, and then do whatever the card says to do appropriately based on the flowchart that I had shown you before in part 1. So let's jump right into this, and I'll be talking about how the game plays throughout, but let's get to it. So what I like to do is, because the US player should not see all of the cards, I just take one card and then flip it over and we jump right into it. Okay, so Labyrinth has three kinds of events, three kinds of cards. There are neutral cards, which have this little gray box here, and maybe I'll flip over the US card to demonstrate this. Okay, so this is not great. There's US cards, which have this sort of I want to say it's a tan color, and the US border here, and then jihadist cards, which are green and have the crescent star of Islam there. Whenever you play a card that belongs to your opponent, so like if I'm the US player and I play a jihadist card, the stuff on the card, the event, will actually fire on top of whatever I want to do with the card. So a big part of the game is managing problems, and just looking at this hand, I can see there's going to be quite a few problems that I have to worry about. But let's not get into that. Let's just jump right back into here. So this card is Saleh. He is the Yemen leader. He plays double game. So this is the name of the card. That's just some flavor text to give you some more details. And then the events are down here. And let's take a look at our little flowchart here. So I'm going to do this a little bit slowly at first, but I'll pick it up later on. The first thing you want to look at is the top half of the player aid, which, just to show you guys again, is this guy over here. You want to look at this guy over here, the event or ops. So the first question you ask is, will the card that the jihadist player is using be used for the event, that is the stuff on the card itself, or for operations? And operations are things you can do aside, or like some base actions that each side can do. So in this case, we'll sort of follow along. So is this a playable non-US event? The keyword playable means, are there any restrictions on the card that prohibits it from being played? And I don't see any, so the answer is yes. And then the next thing we look at is, does the event recruit or place cells? And looking at the text, I can see no. I think if I mouse over it, it'll actually increase it in size. I could be wrong about that. Nope. Okay, never mind. There's nothing here about recruiting or placing cells, so we go to no, and it says play event. Okay, so we will play the event. It says here to test Yemen. So if you notice on the main, we'll just go ahead and close this real quick. If you notice on the main board, there are some countries that are already marked with chits, like Libya and Iraq and Syria. And just roughly speaking, from the game's historical perspective, you can think of this as like Saddam Hussein in charge of Iraq. Or indeed, could be very easily classified as a poor adversary to the U.S. You can see it's in the adversary slot. Syria is a fair adversary. You can think of it as Bashar al-Assad, that's currently in charge. And Libya with Gaddafi, who was still alive back then. Of course, there are some countries that are allies, like the Gulf states and Saudi Arabia. Pakistan is a neutral. But there are many other countries that are, as you can see, unmarked. So one of the key terms that the game will use is to test a country, and this is where you test its governance. A country that is tested is always a neutral country, but you do a die roll to see whether the country's governance is poor or fair. And what you want to do is you want to take one of the player aids, or again, this is in the rules if you look at it, and look at the back of them, and you'll see a section called governance. And you can see on it that you roll a die, and on a result of 1 to 4, the country goes to poor, And on the 5 to 6, it goes fair. So basically a 2/3 chance to go poor or a 1/3 chance to go fair. That means more likely than not, if the countries are tested, they'll likely go poor, but sometimes they might go fair. Just a reminder again, for the U.S., fair countries are better than poor countries, so we're hoping to get lucky. So to do this in the client, you just basically go test country, but that doesn't do a die roll. You have to also click on a die, so we'll go ahead and roll this die. So it comes out at 4. 4 is poor, so that just stays the way it is. Okay, so let's go back to that card again. So we tested Yemen, and then we can see here if U.S., but it's not the U.S. playing, it's the Jihadists. So if Jihadists play, shift it 1 box towards adversary and place besieged regime. That sucks. So this guy is going to become an adversary, and he is going to get a besieged regime marker, which is also not great. We'll talk about these a little bit later on. So that was the play of that. We can kind of allude to President Saleh sort of playing the game against the United States and becoming an adversary. Anyway, so that was the playing of the event, but we need to now go back to that player aid and see, okay, after playing the event, there's a question, is this an unassociated event? And the answer is yes, it is not a US or Jihadist card, so it's an unassociated event. So we actually have to do things with the ops of the card. One of the ways of balancing the bot is that they get to do both the neutral event and also do actions with them. So the first thing we have to look at is a major jihad success possible? Okay, so what is a major jihad? Major jihad is how the jihadists attempt to convert countries to Islamist rule. They can only do that in non-Islamist rule Muslim countries because, once it's Islamist rule, they've already got the power base there, they're all set. At the start of the game, they only have 4 cells in Afghanistan and no other cells anywhere else, so they can't do anything. They have to have cells in the country to do the major jihad. So the answer is no. The next question is a jihad possible in good or fair? Again, there are no cells in good or fair countries. There's only cells in Islamist countries, so we say no. And then the next question is, are there cells available? And I believe the answer to this is yes. Now, what are the cells? The cells available means, is there funding for extra cells? And we'll sort of focus on here. You can see here that there are sort of 3 blocks of funding. There's tight, there is moderate, and then there is ample. And ample is the highest. That means you can access all the cells from tight, moderate, and ample. If the little marker here for funding drops into moderate, that means they're locked out of the ample and they can only access the 2 leftmost. And if it gets all the way down to tight, then they only have access to 5 cells there. As the United States, our goal will be to try to restrict our funding if possible. But that's unlikely. So we do have cells available, so we will be doing what's known as recruit. Recruit is the action of getting more cells from the funding track onto the board. Now, of course, you might ask, well, where do they go? That's when you refer to the bottom half of the player aid. So you can see here we kind of followed all this stuff, and then we got to recruit. And now we get to this part here. We go all the way down to the recruit area, and we kind of follow along, following through here. So first of all, it says, in a regime change country, there are no regime change countries yet. Regime change, as you might imagine, is how the United States counteracts Islamist rule countries, but there are none of those yet, so we skip that one. In Islamist rule with cells less than 2 times the ops. So we'll look at the card again. This is a 3 ops card, so 2 times that is 6. So in Islamist rule with cells less than 6, and Afghanistan has that. There's only 4 cells. That's less than 6. So we have 3 operations points. So for the first 2 of those 3, we'll recruit twice in Afghanistan. Just a matter of dragging the cells out there. So that is 2 of the 3. And then we have 1 more, a 3rd one. So we'll keep going down the recruit. Then, in a non-Islamist rule, non-regime country with the highest recruit success roll. Okay. So typically when the jihadists want to recruit, they have to roll a die, and they succeed if they get less than the governance of the country. So a 1, 2, 3 in Iraq, or a 1, 2 in the Gulf states, or a single 1 if they're trying to do it in a good country like in Europe or in India. However, they can only recruit in countries that have cells. And since the only country that has cells is Afghanistan, and we've already met the requirement, then we will not be recruiting in that way. So we've used all but one of our ops, and we can't do that recruiting because there's no other cells to recruit from. So we have to do what's known as radicalize. And radicalization, I'll be doing quite a bit in this game, is shown up here. It's this radicalization. It's basically this thing here. With all your unused ops, you will do some recruiting, some traveling, and basically really bad stuff when it comes to that. So for the first op, we will be doing a what's known as a recruit, or really a placement, and we will be consulting this table down over here. And so what you do is you roll a tan die and a black die, and the results are a 1 and a 3. And we refer to the table, and that says to roll Shenzhen. That means the cell is going to be placed somewhere in Europe. So you roll on the Shenzhen, which is on the right side, and we'll just roll a single die, and we come up with a 1. And that 1 is Scandinavia. So a cell makes its way up to the home of the Vikings. No, that's racist. All right, so we'll go ahead and place the cell there. Now, whenever a cell enters a country, a Muslim country, you test the governance like we did with Yemen. But if a cell enters a non-Muslim country, like Scandinavia here, we actually roll for its posture. And posture, if you refer to the table back here, is a way to see whether the country goes soft or hard on the war on terror. So the way it works is we roll a die. I'll just roll the die. And on a result of 1 to 4, the country goes soft. And on 5 to 6, it goes hard. So again, 2/3 chance for soft, 1/3 chance for hard. In this case, we rolled a 2. So that means the country is going to go soft. So Scandinavia, not liking going after the jihadists hard, they want to stay soft in the war on terror. So we'll have to update the little tracker down here that keeps track of the GWAT relations. You can see at the start of the game, the posture is at hard of 1. It occupies that spot. The reason why that is because Israel is always hard against the war on terror. Pretty apt, don't you think? However, this Scandinavia going soft means we have 1 hard and 1 soft. They cancel each other out, and we're basically at 0. Also interesting to note is the United States starts off as hard on the war on terror. You can think of it as the Republicans being in power, or the events of 9/11 have just shaken the U.S. so hard that they have aggressively gone after the jihadists. So that explains why the United States starts off as hard. Okay, so that takes care of pretty much everything. We've done all of our 3 ops. We've played the card. The card has been used, so the card is discarded. You can just right-click on it and do discard. And that is the first card of the jihadist play. Now, bear with me. I know this seemed very slow, but that was just a very slow introduction of how all the different parts work. As we pick things up, it'll pick up a lot faster. I'll still be vocalizing all this stuff, but it will be less pointing and explaining and more just getting on with it. I've had games where I've had turns take 5 minutes because I knew exactly what I was doing. Okay, so the next card, we've played the first card. We'll move it up to the second card. Let's flip it up. It is Special Forces. Okay, so this, we'll go ahead and go back to the flowchart again. So we go operations or event. Is this a playable non-US event? Well, let's see here. Play if there is a cell in or adjacent to a country with troops. Okay, so we have troops in the Gulf states and troops in Saudi Arabia. There's 2 there to start off with. And you can see that there are these lines on these countries that indicate adjacency, right? So the Gulf states is adjacent to Iraq and Pakistan and the Gulf states and Iran. But we don't have any troops that are adjacent to the cells in Afghanistan or to Scandinavia. So the answer to that question is no. We don't have any troops adjacent to cells. This makes this a non-playable US event. So we go playable non-US event? No. Is this a playable US event? No. So we will again go through the can we do major jihad? Is a jihad possible? And then recruiting. So once again, we go through that. Major jihad is not possible because there's only cell in Scandinavia and you can't do jihad in non-Muslim countries. And we have cells available, so we'll be recruiting. So recruit, and then we follow the recruit part. In regime change, no. In Islamist rule, cells less than 2 times the ops, no. This is already maxed out, so it can't get any more cells. That was a 1 op card, so 1 times 2 is 2, and this has 6, so 6 is much higher than 2, so no need there. In non-Islamist rule, non-regime change country with highest recruit success rule. Now, this is a bit funky because the only place the jihadists can recruit is in Scandinavia. And following this chart, they will recruit in Scandinavia, which is a bit odd, but it is something they do. So this is not an Islamic country, so we have to roll on the governance, and they will succeed on a 1. Otherwise, they will not recruit at all. So we just roll a single dice, and lo and behold, they get a 1, which means they have succeeded, and they have gotten another cell in Scandinavia. I didn't think that would work, but apparently it did. Okay, so let's go ahead and discard that card to the other. And that was both of the jihadist cards. It is now our turn to take it away. And this is where things get a bit more interesting. Okay, so we have ourselves 2 actions. We can play 2 cards. And we have 9 cards in our opening hand. So you can see here we have quite a number of Islamist cards that we have to worry about. So we have to sort of manage our hand a bit carefully and try and get all of these out safely without doing too many things. Okay, so let's take a look at them. We have one that is discard Iran, Hezbollah, or Jaish al-Mahdi from hand. I don't have any of those cards in my hand, so it doesn't affect me negatively. U.S. posture goes to hard. We're already at hard, so it doesn't matter. And then we roll prestige. Rolling prestige is kind of dangerous because it could nuke our prestige, so we want to kind of leave this to the last. We can see here there's Saddam, which is play if Iraq is a poor adversary, which they are. It'll set funding to 9. But that isn't a problem because their funding is already at 9, so we can kind of play that safely right now. We have some that has to do with regime change countries, but there are none, so that doesn't happen. One that has to do with troops in Iraq, but there are no troops in Iraq. And then Lebanon War is a pretty scary one because that discards us cards, makes us lose the prestige. So it seems like these 2 will want to play to last and play the other ones safely while we can. Okay, so let's go ahead and play Saddam. Actually, no. Let's go ahead and play Saddam. So we'll do the Saddam play. The event happens, but nothing really happens from it, so we'll just sort of skip that. And we have 3 operations to play with. Now, for the United States, whenever you do an operation, you pick a country, and then you have to play a card of sufficient operations to meet the governance of the country. So, for example, if I wanted to play something that affects Saudi Arabia, I would have to use a 3 card, because it is a poor 3 country. The Gulf states, on the other hand, would only need a 2 or a 3. You can overspend, but you can never not. You have to always at least meet the amount. So I'm going to pay the 3, and then I'm going to do what's known as a War of Ideas rule. And a War of Ideas is how the United States tries to improve governance in the Middle East. So for this, we refer to the back of the player aid chart, and there is a table there called War of Ideas table. And basically, we roll a die, we do some DRM modifiers, and if you get a 5 or a 6, it's a 5 or higher, it succeeds. If you get a 4, you get to place an aid, which increases future rolls by 1, and a 1 to 3, or anything lower than a 1, fails. So you have to be... Basically, as the US, you want to get your DRM, your dice roll modifiers for this War of Ideas up high, and if you do, you can kind of steamroll and win the game through the good governance part. So just looking at things here, just following the table here, we are not attempting to shift to good. Like the final push from fair to good would bring a -1 modifier. Our GWAT penalty is 0. So basically, if the world's opinion of how to handle the war on terror is opposite of the United States, you incur a penalty to this, and it can go from 0 to -3. So right now it's at 0 because the world is literally at the tipping point. But if it does go soft, then we get a negative modifier there. Next up is the US's Prestige. So we haven't talked about this yet. This is the US's Prestige. It's 12 spots, and it's split up into 4 partitions. We have low, medium, high, and very high. And this basically translates to a -1, 0, 1, and +1 and +2 modifier for the War of Ideas. And we're currently at a +1, so we want to try and take advantage of that as soon as we can. And then there's a few other things we'll cover later. Okay, so we're basically rolling at a +1, and we get a 1. Of course we get a 1. 1 + 1 is 2, and a 2 is a failure, so nothing happens, and we are sad. As the US, you want to roll high. As a jihadist, you want to roll. And we just unfortunately rolled high. So that's that card gone. Okay, what's up next? Um, Okay, so that was the first one. Let's go ahead and try another War of Ideas. We're going to go ahead and discard Detainee Release. Play if the U.S. disrupted this or last action phase. We haven't disrupted yet. We'll talk about that when we do. We'll spend that to do a War of Ideas in Pakistan. Now, Pakistan is a very important place because they have access to a bunch of WMDs. And if you remember from the opening video, if the jihadists get their hands on that, they have WMDs, they can launch at the United States, and we'd instantly lose. So we want to try and secure Pakistan as well. So once again, rolling for War of Ideas. And we get a 2, which is unfortunate. A 2 plus a 1 is a 3, but a 3 is still a failure. So, not a great start, but hey, what you gonna do? So that was our first and our second card. We now resolve plots, but the jihadists have not plotted yet, and we go back to round 1, and with the jihadists 2 cards. Al-Ittihad al-Islami. Place a cell in Somalia. But let's go ahead and cover this first. This is what's known as a playable non-US event. It is, and it actually does something, and it's a jihadist card. So typically with the jihadist cards, you will do the stuff in the box, in the text if you can, and that's it. You don't do anything else with it. In this case, this one does place cells, and we do have cells on the track. If the track was empty, we'd actually just use this for operations when it does. So we will place a cell in Somalia, and we'll do that right now. So place a cell in Somalia. So goes up, and for those lacking in geography, Somalia is indeed in East Africa, so that goes there. Now notice the cell was placed in Somalia and it has not been tested, so we will have to test Somalia. So let's go ahead and just click test country and then roll a die. And it comes out a 1. That's unfortunate. If you remember from when we did Yemen, a 1 to 4 means it is poor. So that takes care of that. Notice the card has the text remove at the bottom. Whenever a card is played for the event and it has remove, it is removed from the game, which means it will not come up in future deck reshuffles. This can be good or bad depending on how powerful the card is. So let's go ahead and right-click and select this card to out of play. And if you go to cards, you can see that there, and that will not get shuffled back into the deck. That's great. So that was the first card. Pretty quick, huh? All right, next up is the second card, IEDs. Okay, is this a playable non-US event? It is not, because it says play if a cell is in a regime change country, and there are no regime change countries yet, so that is discarded. Instead, we have a 1 operation that we have to contend with. So we'll follow down the thing here. Is it a major jihad success possible? No. Jihad possible in good or fair? No. And then cells available. We can recruit. Okay. So this is where things are a bit different. Notice that although we do have a cell in Somalia, you can't commit a major jihad until you have 5 more cells than troops in a country. So there's only 1. They need another 4 to be able to successfully convert the country to jihadist rule. Okay, so we're going to go to recruit because we have cells available. There's still a bunch left. And we'll follow through the recruit. So in a regime change country, there's no regime change countries. In Islamist rule with cells less than 2 times the ops was 2. And again, this is all filled up, so excuse me, not there. And then in non-Islamist rule, non-regime change country with highest recruit success rule. Okay, so there's only 2 places this can happen. It's Somalia or Scandinavia. And Scandinavia is a success of 1, and Somalia is a success of 1, 2, or 3. So Somalia is the answer. So we'll go ahead and roll a die for Somalia. Oh, it's a 4. 4 is higher than 3, so it does not succeed. And that is a card essentially wasted for the jihadists. And it's back to us with our 2 cards. Okay, so what do we have here? I'm not too worried about the jihadists just yet. And I know they're going to make a move on Somalia, but that's not a huge deal. Ethiopia strikes could be useful because that could convert that back into poor neutral, but I won't do that. I think we should do some more War of Ideas while we still have the DRM for the War of Ideas. So we'll go ahead and discard. Place 1 aid in Iraq. Nah. We'll discard Kurdistan for the 2 ops for a War of Ideas roll in Pakistan. And roll high! We got a 1! That sucks. Alright, let's try it again. Let's use Ethiopia strikes. Actually, no, let's use Kermalist Republic, yes. And so we roll. We get a 3. Okay, now we're talking. So we have a 3. Add the 1, we get to 4. And if you remember, A 4 places an aid in a country. So take the little aid token from the markers, go to miscellaneous, and just drag that out into Pakistan. So now our future War of Ideas rolls will have a +1 modifier. That should help a bit, I hope. Okay, so that was our 2 cards. I was just back-to-back playing. I kind of skipped over that. And it's back to the Jihadists again. So their next card is going to be Lashkar-e-Taiba. Kashmir Insurgency spawns Jihadists. Place a cell each in Pakistan and India, blocked by Indo-Pakistani talks. So this is an event that can be played, and this is a Jihadist event, so only the event will happen, and that's it, nothing else. So we'll go ahead and do that. That's a little unfortunate, because that means they have a cell now in Pakistan, and one in India, too. Okay, so a cell has been placed in India, which means we have to roll for its posture. Now we're going to hope we roll high, and we do. It comes out 5. That's excellent. That means they will go hard on the war on terror. So we have to update this now. We have 2 hard countries, Israel and India, and Scandinavia, which is soft, so it comes out to 1. That's good. That's excellent. Okay, that was their first card, and their second card will be Gaza Withdrawal. Okay, so this is an event that is neutral, or unassociated. So essentially, we will play the event and also do something with the 1 op. So let's do the event. Okay. If Jihadists place a cell in Israel. Ooh, that's a bit scary. Okay. Let's go ahead and place a cell in Israel. So he goes right there. And then we have 1 op. And this is where we follow the 3 basic questions we ask. Is a major jihad possible? No, because there's no 5 cells more than troops yet. Is a jihad possible in good or fair? Yes. A jihad is possible in Pakistan because a cell is there. So they will perform a jihad. So when a cell performs a jihad, they flip over to become active. That basically means is they're easier for the U.S. to take them out if they decide to take them out. And they will roll a die for each cell performing a jihad there. And let's just go and roll the die. And on a success, which is less than the country's governance, so a 2 or a 1 in this case, they would succeed and they would reduce the governance 1 level, so they'll go to 4. But if it fails, then the cell is removed and goes back to the funding track. So this guy is going back because he rolled the 6, which is not good for the Jihadist player. So that was okay. Could have gone worse. This card was played for the event, so it is removed, so we'll send it to out of play. And that was both cards. The Jihadist is back to us. Okay. I was a bit worried about Pakistan there, so I really want to try and secure that. Let's go ahead and play Ethiopia Strikes for the 2 ops and try another roll in Pakistan. And we get a 3. Okay, so looking at all of our modifiers, we have a 3, and then a 4, +1 from the here with prestige, and then a +1 from here, so it's a 5. And the 5 is a success. Okay, so when you succeed, you do the following. If the country was neutral, you shift it to ally. And we'll do just that. And then if it was an ally, then you increase the governance by 1. So this is good. So we got Pakistan as an ally. And allies are great because that means we can send troops there and try to protect them from jihadists who might try to convert the country. And Pakistan's a very important battleground because, again, they have access to those... they have access to nuclear weapons, and that could be really bad if they fell into the hands of the jihadists. Okay, so that was our first card. What to do now? Well, it's going to be hard to make the final push, although I have a +1 modifier if I do it in Pakistan, because going from fair to good is a -1 modifier, but that counters the aid, so I'd be rolling at a +1, which is not bad. I like those odds. So what I'm going to do is with one of those ops, I'm going to go ahead and play Viero de Melo Slain, beloved UN leader killed in Warzone. Frankly, this doesn't fire because there is no regime change country, so we can discard that safely. Notice that it's only discarded, it's not removed from play because the event did not happen. So this might come up later in another reshuffle. Okay, so we have that 1 card, and we're going to put that 1 card in reserves. So reserves here is something the US player can use, the Jihadist player could use it too, but the bot does not allow for it. Basically, you can combine a card with reserves to get to a certain operations value higher than the cards by themselves. So, like with the 2 1s I had, 1s are not great, but if I can combine those 2 1s into a 2, then I could do something in, say, Pakistan. So I'll kind of do a safe play and put that there for my second card. And that is that. We go back to the Jihadists. Okay, their first card is Fatwa. Play if both sides have cards beyond this one. Trade random cards. Then, oh, that's not cool. Okay, so this is an unassociated card, and it does happen because there are cards beyond this one. So we will trade random cards. Okay, so I basically will get the top card. Yes, that's as random can be. So what is that card? We'll flip it over. Okay, that's interesting. And we're going to give them one of these 3 cards. I'm going to make it random. I'm going to roll a die. This one on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they get FREs. Okay, that could have been worse. So we'll flip that over and give that to the Jihadist. Okay, so we trade random cards, then conduct an operation with this card. Okay, so we conduct a 1-op with that card, and we'll just follow the little flowchart again. Is a major jihad nope. Is a jihad possible ferret? Nope, because that cell is gone. Are cells available? Yes, so we will recruit. Recruit in a regime change country where troops, no, regime change. Islamist rule is already maxed out because that was a 1-op, and if it's at 6, it's basically maxed out. You don't have to even look at those. And non-Islamist rule, non-regime change country with highest recruit success roll. Okay, and again, that is going to be Somalia because they have a cell there. So they're going to try to recruit once, and they get a 6, so they fail. Okay, now that was playing the operation with this card, but this is still an unassociated card, so we have to do an operation with the 1-op again. I hope that makes sense, right? We just finished all the event text. Now we're doing the actual stuff for the number at the top left. So once again, just following through the flowchart, we come to the exact same conclusion of doing another recruit roll in Somalia. So we'll try that again, and we'll roll a die, and they get another 6, so they fail yet again. Okay, that was their first card of the round, if you don't miss that. Their second card, we already know what it's going to be. It is going to be FREs, and that is a non-playable event because there are no troops in Iraq. So they're just going to do the same 3 things again. Is the major jihad? No. Jihad possible and good affair? No. And we recruit. And once again, we're going to recruit in Somalia. So one more time. Can't seem to get any good luck this time. Alright. I guess we're doing okay. Oh, I'm doing this alright. I'm pretty sure I'm doing this alright. Okay. Anyway. It's our turn now. Okay. So we still have a 1-op card. That's good, even though it's a different one. But it really doesn't make a huge difference. The event on this is not too strong, so I'm not too impressed. Let's go ahead and play it. So we're going to use that card, combine it with the reserves card to do a War of Ideas in Pakistan, and hope for a high roll. We get a 5. That's really, really good. Okay, so let's do the adders. So we have a 5. Plus 1 is a 6. Plus 1 is a 7. Minus 1 because we're going from fair to good, so it's a 6 again. That is enough. That brings it to good governance. And huzzah! We have our first good governance country of the game. It is Pakistan. So we're up 2 resources. That's excellent stuff. Okay. Now, great. And this aid marker goes away. Aid markers go away when countries get to good. So it looks like we should try spreading things now that we're there. And unfortunately, the last 2 cards we have are pretty dangerous, but I do want to play them because they are 3 operations actions. This could go wrong quite quickly. It's quite likely we'll lose a lot of prestige if we play that. This is the safer one, I would say. But the Jihadists do have one last card. I don't know what that card could be. Alright. You know what? Go big or go home. Let's play Axis of Evil. Okay, so we're gonna... Whenever you play a card for the event, this is different from the bot, you have your operations and then you have the event. The player playing the card can choose which order to do things in. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do the event do the operations first, and then play the card for the event. So I have a 3. I'm going to overspend a bit and do a War of Ideas in the Gulf States. So I'm going to go ahead and roll a die. I got a 4. Okay, let's do some adding and subtracting. So it's a Gulf States. we're going from 4, so we have a +1 from prestige, so that's a 5. +1 from a neighboring good country, so that's Pakistan, so we're at a 6. So yeah, you can see why having good countries are great, because it helps spread democracy. Or, you call it democracy, I call it good governance. So we have a 6, and then -1 for the final push, so we're at a 5. That's enough. It gets it up to good. So we're now at 5 resources of good. That's amazing. We're off to a really good start. Okay, let's not get too ahead of ourselves though, because we have to do the event now. U.S. discards any Iran, Hezbollah, or none of those in our hand because we were smart and we waited till the end. U.S. posture to hard. We are at hard. Yep. And then we roll prestige. Okay, this is the dicey part. We're gonna go discard this card while we take care of that. So rolling prestige is, I guess, the game's way of saying, how does the world react to something insane the U.S. just did? And for the reference of that card, you kind of saw it was George W. Bush giving his Axis of Evil speech back in the day that a lot of people thought was quite, I'd say, interesting. So what you do is you refer to the back of the player aid. It says prestige. So randomly drop or raise U.S. prestige. What we do is we first roll a single die. That's not good. So on a 1 to 4, the prestige is going to drop. On a 5 or 6, it will rise. Now, this modifier I just mentioned is further modified by the world's GWAT penalty. So if a GWAT penalty is actually there, if it's greater than 0, so basically if the world is soft at 1, 2, or 3 while you're hard, or vice versa, then you actually modify that roll by -1, which means prestige will only go up on a 6, but it will drop on a 1 to 5. If I'm reading that correctly, I'm pretty sure I am. But we got a 1. There's no saving grace from that. What you do next is you roll 2 die, and your prestige will go down by the lower of the 2. Thankfully, we rolled a 1 and 2, which means our prestige will only drop by 1. Imagine if we got boxcars or 6s or 5s. That would have been really bad. But thankfully, not too shabby. Okay, so that was the Jihadist card, and they are done. So now it's back over. So that was our second card, and we're back over to us. I have to say, though, that risk of the losing prestige was worth getting the Gulf States to good governance, so I'm happy. Alright, and their final card is Biometrics. This turn... Okay, so this is a different type of card for the Jihadists. This is a playable U.S. card. Admittedly, the effect is not great because this kind of affects the turn, and the turn is about over, but we still have to follow the flowchart anyway. So, if we follow the flowchart, we get to playable U.S. event, yes, and we get to plot. Plotting is how the Jihadists try to hinder the United States. So we'll go ahead and follow through with this. So we go for plot as much as possible in the United States. There are no cells in the U.S., so they can't plot there. Then we ask, is the U.S.'s prestige low? No, it is not low. Okay, is the event Abu Sayyaf an event in effect in the Philippines? No, it's not. We haven't seen that card yet. Okay, then we plot in countries with troops. Well, there are countries with troops, but there are no cells to plot in those countries, so we skip that over. Okay, the next question we ask is the GWAT penalty greater than 0? Well, no, the penalty is 0 because the world is hard and we are hard. Okay, then they will try to plot in countries of the U.S.'s posture. Okay, so what cells are there that have the U.S.'s posture? There's Israel and there's India because they are hard and the United States is hard. Now, I'm going to make a side note here and note that so the reason why the Jihadists would want to plot in these countries and do it as they do is to try to change their posture from, in this case, hard to soft. But we know that Israel's stance is always hard and never changes. However, looking at these rules, one can come to the conclusion that even though Israel's stance can change, you still follow along and do that. So, typically, if I was playing on a higher difficulty, I might add the extra challenge of maybe not making that possible. But for this video, I'm going to allow a plot in Israel to happen with relatively little consequence if it does so far. So we're going to go ahead and do a triple roll, a single roll. On a 1 to 3, we'll plot in Israel, and on a 4 to 6, we'll plot in India. Okay, it's a 1 to 3, so a plot will happen in Israel. So this guy becomes active. He flips over. I use Control A to flip him to active. And he's going to roll a die. And he gets a 1. Okay. So if you get a number less than the country's governance, or 1 in this case, you place a plot in that country. So we're just going to grab a random plot from the available plots and place it in Israel. Okay. So that was their 1 card. That's discarded. And they have no more cards, even though they have another action phase, so they're basically done. And it comes over to us. Okay. So we have a plot in Israel, but it's not a big deal, because plots do essentially 2 things. First of all, when plots go off, they can try to reduce governance if it's a Muslim country, but it's not a Muslim country. In a non-Muslim country, if a plot goes off, they will, the country will sort of reassess its posture on the war on terror and do another posture roll. Again, that 2/3 soft, 1/3 hard that we did before. However, because it's Israel, that part's kind of nullified, because they're always hard. You can plot as much as you want, but I think we all know Israel too well. So I'm not too worried about that. The other aspect of plots is that successful plots will increase jihadist funding if they go off. And it's great if that happens in good countries, because they get a lot of money that way. However, their funding's at 9, so I'm not too worried. So when it all comes down to it, I don't care about this plot. Typically, I could spend a 3-op card or a 3 ops with the reserves to alert a plot to remove it. But I'm not worried about this one, so I'm going to leave it be. Okay, so the last question is, do I want to play this card? Can I do anything useful with this card? I don't think so. I mean, I could just alert the plot for the sake of doing it, but again, it doesn't do anything. I mean, I can't. I mean, that would be dumb, because I would lose a prestige in doing so and get them to place the country. So I'm just going to go ahead and discard it. So, as the United States, you are allowed to always hold on to 1 last card until the jihadist player is completely done. Or alternatively, you could so that last card, you can either play it or you can hold on to it. And then, when you get to the end, you can either keep it for your next hand. You'll be dealt a fresh new card of hands. You'll have that card too. Or you can discard it without having the event fire. So that's the way of the U.S. managing 1 bad card in their hands. I'm going to go ahead and just discard it and have it not trigger. Okay, the plot does go off. We'll reveal it. It's a 2. But again, as we've established, nothing bad, nothing really changes from that. So yeah, Israel is just as upset as ever. Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap things up here. We'll go ahead and set this back up to the first action phase. And if you look here at the top, you can see there is an end of turn sort of procedure you do after a full round of cards are dealt. The first thing you do is you give the Islamists a -1 funding. So they lose a funding. Every round they'll lose a funding. I know the text is small, but I'm just kind of remembering this from memory. The U.S. will lose a prestige if there are any Islamist-ruled countries on the board. And there is. Afghanistan is still there. So the U.S.'s prestige goes down by 1. The U.S. would gain a prestige if the world was at the 3 and GWAT of the same posture type as the U.S. So if the world was hard 3 and the U.S. was hard as well, then the prestige would go up by 1. Or conversely, if the U.S. was soft and the world was soft 3, same thing. But that's not the case, so prestige doesn't go up by 1. We'd remove any lapsing events, set the reserves to 0, and deal new hands and a couple other things. But that's pretty much it. We'll go ahead and deal with the new hands, and then we'll stop the video here and give a quick recap of what's happened. So we'll go ahead and deal 9 cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9. And then for the jihadists, the same story. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we have 9 cards for each player. The reason why it's 9 is because we are at low intensity with the troops, so we draw 9 cards. And jihadist funding, while at 8, is still an ample, so they will also draw 9 cards. So let's take a quick recap of what happened here. So we had the jihadists expanding their power base in Afghanistan, getting up all their cells out there. We had a cell travel to Scandinavia, try to convert the world to soft, and they succeeded in doing there. Then we had the Lakshmir, what was the card called again? I'm trying to remember its name. Yeah, Balakshar-e Taiba. I'm not sure if that's Arabic or Urdu, occur, which placed a cell in India and Pakistan. India went hard, which was very, very fortunate for us. And Pakistan had a cell there. They tried to do jihad there, but they failed. And then we ultimately were able to convert Pakistan and the Gulf states to good governance, which is great. Finally, some cells were placed in Israel, and Somalia was tested. Oh, and Saleh came out, and Yemen became a poor adversary. Adversaries are problematic because the US cannot deal with them very easily, so these guys are kind of out of reach for the most part. There are some cards that can help bring them back to neutral, which from then you can do War of Ideas, but adversaries are very hard to play with. So Saleh has said no to the US, and of course Gaddafi, Bashar al-Assad, and Saddam Hussein are still at it. Interesting thing to note here is that the game typically says that every turn, every hand of cards played is about a year of events that happened. And notice that the United States, in this case, elected to not invade Afghanistan and try to play things from a soft perspective. I'll admit I'm trying to put a nice explanation to a gaming perspective, but something to keep note of, huh? You don't have to solve everything with war and violence. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I'd love to see any comments or suggestions on how to improve these videos. I'm hoping the mouse clicking wasn't too much of a problem. Feel free to subscribe, and I will be out with turn 2 of Labyrinth, the War on Terror, next time. Thank you all for watching. This was Darth Caboose. Have a nice day.